Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Daily Fulham Podcast. Thank you for being here, wherever you may be joining us from. I'm Gavin Ruffle, and this is our Wildcard Wednesday episode. A bit of a fun one, if I do say so myself. Something a little bit different, and hey, if you happen to be a fan of another Premier League club, then this will be of interest to you as well. As I'm sure you're all aware, the transfer window is open, so with that in mind, I've decided to create my own fantasy transfer draft. I'll be going through all 20 clubs and offering trades between the clubs. However, the catch is I have to use trades involving all of those 20 clubs, which means a maximum of one player per club can join any other club. Confused? Don't worry, it'll soon become clear. And whilst this is a fantasy draft, I'm going to try to keep an element of realism to it, whilst also bordering on the ambitious side. Some of these moves will seem fanciful, but not quite beyond the realms of possibility. So for instance, Erling Haaland won't be joining Southampton, and Mo Salah won't be getting his knees dirty at Portman Road. There'll be none of that nonsense. As I said, it will become a bit easier to understand once we get into it, so let's waste no time and do just that. I'm going to work my way up the table, so starting from the bottom, and you all know who that is. It is Southampton. Southampton, this is going to be a difficult month for them to do business, isn't it? Because any player signing for Southampton goes there with the knowledge that they're probably doomed. They're probably going down. They'll be back playing Championship football at the start of August. You could have prime Pele, Maradona, Messi and Ronaldo. You could add that to this Southampton team. They've got no chance in hell of staying up. Their ambition right now must be to get more than 11 points so that they aren't holders of that unenviable record of least points in the Premier League season, which Derby County is still clinging on to at this moment in time. It's difficult to be too ambitious with the situation they're in, but I'm going to bring in a player from Wolves with the idea that he's going to be a big part of this team going forward next season for the rebuild, where they can look to get themselves back in the Premier League and hopefully make a better fist of it than they have this time. This is a player who has reasonable Championship experience, has had some success in the Championship, getting promoted with Sheffield United, and that player is from Wolves, and it's Tommy Doyle. He's been a little bit in and out in the Wolves setup this season. I think with a run of games in the team, he is a good player. He is a player that can play in the Premier League, but I think Southampton, what they need to do, get him in January, and then next season they can build their team around him and go straight back up. Next up, we have Leicester, and the goals have really dried up since Ruud van Nistelrooy has taken over. They're still reliant on a 38-year-old in Jamie Vardy, legend of the club, to score their goals. So for this one, I'm going from old to young. No, not Ashley Young, but I'm looking at Brighton here, and I'm looking at a player to add to their forward options, and that player would be Evan Ferguson. Burst on the scene, didn't he, as a teenager? He scored a Premier League hat-trick at the age of 18. But since the arrival of the new manager there, he seems to have fallen out of favour, as he restricted to mainly appearances off the bench. I know during that time when he did burst on the scene, there were comparisons being made to players like Teddy Sheringham. I feel like he is a player, if you give him a run of games, if you provide the service, then he will score goals. That's another little bit of a problem at Leicester as well, maybe lack of service. But Evan Ferguson, for me, give him a run in the team, give him games, and he'll prove his worth. Evan Ferguson, that's my trade. He goes from Brighton to Leicester. Next up, we have the third of those promoted teams, and that is Ipswich. And I'm actually going to bring in a player from Arsenal to join the Ipswich fold. A bit of a forgotten man. Some of you may not even realise that he's still at Arsenal, and that player is Kieran Tierney. He made an impressive start to life at Arsenal after spending his early career at Celtic, but a serious knee injury, and he's never really been able to recover from that. Since those injuries, he's not been in Mikel Arteta's thinking. He's played a variety of left-backs this season, but Kieran Tierney is not one of them. Why do Ipswich need a left-back, you may ask? Because they have a perfectly decent left-back of their own in Leif Davis. Well, there's a thing called the domino effect, isn't there? And that applies to football, that applies to the transfer window. So without giving too much away just yet, his name may pop up a little bit later on. So that's why I'm bringing in Kieran Tierney from Arsenal to Ipswich. Just outside the relegation zone, we have Wolves. Wolves, I feel like they do have some decent players, especially in midfield and going forward. However, they are shipping far too many goals, and a lot of those goals are coming from set pieces. They have been dealt a bit of bad luck. Mosquera suffering a long-term injury, he's out for the season. Craig Dawson isn't getting any younger, and Dawson isn't even in the new manager's thinking at the minute. Vitor Pereira, he's opted for a back three, which includes Matt Doherty, Totti Gomez as well. So I think they need a player at the back that can deal with those set pieces, maybe adds a bit of leadership qualities as well. And the player I'm looking at is Lacroix from Crystal Palace. After replacing Joachim Andersen, Palace having a slow start to the season, but they've slowly started to find their feet, and he's been an important member of their team. Again, this was one of those transfers. It's not going to happen, of course. It's not. It's fancy for, but I think that is the type of player that Wolves should be looking at and identifying. He's got good passing range. He's tall. He's quick, and a player like that would be more than welcome at Molineux. So for my next transfer, making a move from Crystal Palace to Wolves, is Maxence Lacroix. Next team we have up is Everton, and what have they struggled to do this season? The most difficult thing to do, and that is putting the ball in the net. They've struggled to score goals. Despite their 3 against Spurs, they still remain the lowest in the league, and they failed to score in 12 Premier League games, which is more than any other side. I'm not getting carried away with Calvert-Lewin's goal against Spurs. I think during his time in the Premier League, he's been a decent striker, but that's about it, a decent striker. He's never someone I've considered prolific. And what Everton need is when they create opportunities. Again, you've got a team here that probably have struggled to create opportunities. But what they need when they create those opportunities is a bagsman. Someone that you can rely on to put the ball in the net. And that man is from Brentford, and it's Yoane Wissa. Of players to have more than 40 shots across the league this season, Wissa actually has the second best conversion rate, only behind Alexander Isak. 22.7%, which is 10 goals from 44 shots. If you compare that to the aforementioned Dominic Calvert-Lewin, well, Calvert-Lewin's stats are significantly inferior to that. 3 goals from 46 shots, which represents a 6.5% conversion rate. So you get the ball to Yoane Wissa. He knows where the back of the net is. Yoane Wissa from Brentford to Everton. Another team that have struggled this season, who have higher aspirations than where they currently find themselves, and that is Tottenham Hotspur. They've got their problems, haven't they? They seem quite easy to play against. They've been plagued by injuries at the back. Their 2 main centre-halves are missing, but for me, they look lightweight in midfield as well. Bentancur has missed a number of games for various reasons. Bissouma's missed games as well, and I don't think he's quite the player he was when Ange first came in, or the player he was when he was at Brighton. Sarr and Bergvall, they're very talented players, as well as Archie Gray, but they're just a bit lightweight. It lacks a bit of bite in midfield. So, what do they need? They need Romeo Lavia from Chelsea. He's a player that's strong, good on the ball, can carry it well, and he played well, didn't he, in Chelsea's meeting with Spurs quite recently, even though he just played the 45 minutes there. That's a player they could really do with. So, Romeo Lavia is moving across London. He's going from west to north, from Chelsea to Spurs. So that covers the bottom 6 clubs. Next up, we will move on to the teams in the middle of the pack. But before I come on to that, let me tell you all about our sponsors. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Right then, next we come on to another club where there's a lot of expectation at, especially given the business they did in the summer, the transfer activity there. A lot was expected of this club to be higher in the table than they are currently, but things haven't worked out. They're under new management, under Graham Potter, and most of those players that came in the summer have under-delivered. One of the positions that has been a problem for them for a long time has been their centre-forward position. Mikel Antonio has operated in that role for a very long time now. They brought in Nicholas Fulkrug in the summer, one of those signings, and he hasn't quite set the world alight. He's injured now, so I think that is an area they will look at and identify. And I'm going to upset some Fulham fans here, but there have been links with Rodrigo Muniz in recent times, in recent days, and you can understand why, can't you? Fulham fans would rather me offload Carlos Vinicius, but I think Rodrigo Muniz would be a good move for West Ham. Muniz, having started the season as the main man at Fulham, is now playing second fiddle. He can go to West Ham knowing that he has a big part to play. Silva has knocked back any suggested interest in Muniz, but the fact that West Ham have resorted to playing Lucas Paquetá as a false nine now illustrates the problems they have in that position, and that's certainly something they will need to do, and I feel like Rodrigo Muniz would be a good get for them. And we continue the theme, don't we, with clubs that are underperforming, that haven't matched expectations, and that club is Manchester United. Well, where do we start? They're a huge club, but they're at such a low ebb. There's many areas you can look at in this team and identify positions where they may need strengthening, but the problem is when new players come to Manchester United, it seems to be a poison chalice and it seems to be a graveyard. When new signings come in, they don't deliver. They seem to be a shadow of their former selves. One of the players that did come in the summer was Matthijs de Ligt, and you could put him possibly in that same conversation. Another player that was linked with them was Jared Brantwaite from Everton, and that's who I am suggesting they sign this January. This is the player they should have signed in the summer because he has Premier League experience, so he doesn't need to adapt to a new league. Martinez and Maguire, they have the odd good game here and there, but they're not consistent enough at this moment in their career. Brantwaite, on the other hand, is part of an impressive Everton defence. He didn't start the season, did he, because of injury, but once he's got his way back into the team now, he's a mainstay. Joint least amount of goals conceded by a bottom half club, and as I said, he's not a player that's coming in from foreign shores that takes time to adapt to the new league, the new environment. He'll be ready to go straight from the off, and that's something I feel they should look for. We now move on to Crystal Palace, and if I look at their team, if I look at their squad, I think defensively they're absolutely fine. They actually share the record with Everton for least amount of goals conceded by a bottom half team. I do think they have some decent options in midfield when everyone is fit. They don't seem to play with wingers, they play with their five at the back. But I think they could need a bit of help in the forward line. Mateta's just started banging a few goals recently. Eddie Nketiah has been a disappointment. And the player they should sign from Manchester United is Marcus Rashford to kickstart his career again. Since Amrim's come in at Manchester United, it seems like Marcus Rashford is surplus to requirements, which is strange because he did score in Amrim's first couple of games in charge, but now he's definitely on the outside looking in, isn't he? And he's not a young player at this stage now, he's 27 years of age, and he actually has 60 England caps to his name. And you feel with the current situation as it is, he's a long way from getting his 61st international cap. We're still uncertain of what his best position is. He's played a lot left wing, he's played sometimes up front. The jury's out as far as that's concerned, but I think going to a club like Crystal Palace, he can really kickstart his career again, because there's no doubt on his day he is a talent and he just needs to be loved. We're sticking with London now as we move on to Brentford, and I have to find a Southampton player. So Brentford have drawn the short end of the stick, or have they? Because Southampton do have a very young, talented player in Tyler Diblin. There's been rumours surrounding him about moves to bigger clubs, higher up in the league table. If I'm being honest, I don't think he's ready for that at the minute. That could derail his career. We've seen that in the past with young players going to big clubs. They don't get game time and then it really sets them back. I feel going to a club here in Brentford, we don't know what's going to happen with Brian Mbeumo, but if Brian Mbeumo does depart, then I see Tyler Dibbling as a decent replacement. He's versatile, he can play in several positions, he's a real exciting talent and his best days are in front of him, and I think he would be a really smart acquisition for Brentford. We move on to Brentford's West London rivals now. We're going to go to Fulham. Looking at the Fulham squad, the Fulham team, what business can they do? What business do they need to do? I've got a really exciting player for Fulham. This is probably unrealistic. It's not going to happen. It's probably fanciful, but you never know. You never know. And it's actually a guy who cost £100 million making the move from Aston Villa to Manchester City, and that is Jack Grealish. Fulham have some decent options out wide, but Reece Nelson is on loan, currently injured at the minute. So if you're looking for a longer term replacement, then what better player than Jack Grealish? He'll be disappointed this season with just 1 goal and 4 assists. He's been a bit below par, but he isn't necessarily getting the game time. He isn't first choice. And we talk about Marcus Rashford, a player looking to galvanise their career, kickstart their career again, get back into the England squad. Well, Jack Grealish certainly falls into that category. He is only 29. He's been around for a long time, but he has several good years left in him at the top. I feel like that would be a signing to excite all Fulham fans. Just above Fulham in the league table, we have Brighton. They continue to be a force in the Premier League. Whatever transfer activity they do, it always seems to work effectively, whether that's bringing in more experienced Premier League players or bringing in players that people have never heard of and selling them on for a bigger price. I look at their squad and I think they probably could do with an upgrade at right back. So I'm going to bring in for them from Spurs, Jed Spence. Jed Spence, for the first time in his career at Spurs, has managed to string a few games together, albeit not in a favoured position, playing at left wing back, predominantly in the absence of a doggy. I think if you give him a consistent run of the team, play him in his best position at right back, there's a player that can really blossom, and you'll start to see the best of him, which got him his move from Middlesbrough to Spurs in the first place. In Brighton, we've seen them play with a back five in the past, playing with a back four at the minute. I feel like Jed Spence would fit perfectly into this team. I think he's a bit better than their options at the minute in Tariq Lamptey and Joel Veltman. So Jed Spence, he's making the move from Spurs to Brighton. Just above Brighton in the league table, we have Aston Villa, and making the move from West Ham to Aston Villa will be Jarrod Bowen. With Jarrod Bowen, you know what you're going to get with him. He's so reliable. He provides goals and assists. Villa, their wide options I don't feel are the best at the minute. Leon Bailey isn't necessarily hitting the heights. Diaby's obviously moved on from last season. So you want someone in there that can provide extra support for Ollie Watkins and John Duran. And Jarrod Bowen can absolutely do that. He'll add goals to take the pressure off those players. So he'll move from one Claret and Blue team to another Claret and Blue team. The final team we're looking at in this part is Bournemouth. And I mentioned something about the domino effect earlier concerning Ipswich and them bringing in Kieran Tierney as left back. That's because Leif Davis is moving from Ipswich to go to Bournemouth. And again, you'll ask why. They have a perfectly good left back in Milos Kerkis. Well, there's a reason why, and we'll come on to that in the third part. But Leif Davis was a standout performer in the Championship last season. He's found it a bit tougher this season, obviously in the Premier League, having to make the step up. But there is a vacancy in that position for England at the minute. They're not blessed with great options at left back. Leif Davis's chances, as far as an international call-up, probably aren't great at the minute, just considering the team he's playing for and their position in the league. If he moves to a club like Bournemouth, then I expect him to blossom and improve as a player under Iraola. I feel like it's a perfect environment for him to excel. They have a very young squad there. Leif Davis is 25, so again, he's a player, his best years are probably in front of him. And I can see that as a seamless transition. Kerkes goes and Leif Davis comes in. That's the end of part 2 for our fantasy transfer draft. In the third and final part, we'll be looking at the top 6 clubs and seeing what activity needs to be done there. But before I come on to that, let me draw your attention to GSPN. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasts, with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages. It's your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. Come on to Newcastle now. And Newcastle, they don't play with an attacking midfielder, do they? They have that flat midfield three, which has received a lot of compliments lately. A lot of people saying that's the best midfield in the Premier League. And given their recent form and results, it's hard to argue against that. But I feel that someone that could add a different dimension to the way they play is a more attack-minded midfielder. And that player is Morgan Rogers. And again, take that with a pinch of salt because it is a fantasy draft. While some of these are more realistic, this one, I can assure you Aston Villa fans and Newcastle fans, this one isn't going to happen, but it's my selection, so that's what we're going with here. Morgan Rogers, since he's come to Aston Villa from Middlesbrough, he's been a real revelation. He's a player that's really exciting to watch, even as a neutral. He's a great ball carrier. I just feel he's a player that can link up well with the striker. He would add another element to this Newcastle side that would make them even more dangerous. Next up, we come on to the reigning champions, Manchester City, and right back has been a real problem position, hasn't it? Kyle Walker has been a bit of a liability this season after nailing down that position since arriving in 2017. He's been one of the top fullbacks in the Premier League over that period of time. You could argue he's been one of the top right backs in Premier League history. But it does seem like his best days are probably behind him, although AC Milan fans will be hoping otherwise. Enrico Lewis, who seemed like the natural successor, he's had some of his problems as well, hasn't quite owned that position when he has played the season, but he's not the only Manchester City player that has struggled. Such has been the problem in that area, the part that Mateus Nunes has now found himself in that position in the last couple of games. You know where I'm going with this. They need a right back, and that right back is coming from Nottingham Forest, and it's Ola Aina, who's a much improved player, playing the best football of his career at the age of 28. He's also very versatile. He can play right back, he can play left back, he can play in a back three, a back five as one of the centre halves. If you're into your fantasy football, he's the top scoring defender on that. And there has been talk in dispatches about him possibly moving to Manchester City. I don't see any movement on that as far as this window is concerned. But maybe that's one to watch in the future. Who knows? But certainly Manchester City need to address that right back position. And we come on to the top four now, and the team currently occupying fourth place is Chelsea, and I feel like they need a goalkeeper. It's been a bit of a problem position since Thibaut Courtois has left. They thought they had their ready-made replacement in Kepa, but he wasn't quite up to the mark now, although he's doing quite well at Bournemouth. And Robert Sanchez was brought in despite at that stage being second choice at Brighton. So he's gone from second choice at Brighton to first choice at Chelsea. And another error against Wolves, although it didn't cost his team in the end, but he has had 4 errors leading to goals this season. I just feel for a club of the size of Chelsea, where they're looking to win trophies, possibly win the league, the Robert Sanchez isn't quite of that calibre. Even though if you look at statistics, I think as far as save percentage in the league goes, he's right up there. But obviously the errors that lead to goal get highlighted, and I think they need someone just a bit more reliable, someone more assured in that position. So I'm looking to Leicester here, and I'm looking to Mads Hermansen. Mads Hermansen had one of the standout performances from a goalkeeper this season. That's when he made 13 saves at the Emirates, and since stats have been in existence, since Opta stats have been in existence, there's only been one occasion where a Premier League keeper has made more than that. He's 23 years of age, and if Leicester get relegated, he's certainly a player I see moving on. 7 defeats in a row for Leicester, and I don't think it's any coincidence that he's been absent for those games. He's been a big loss, and I think he is a better goalkeeper than Robert Sanchez, and at that age of 23, he could be the potential number one there for years to come. We move from Chelsea to Nottingham Forest, who are having an amazing season. They're a very hard-working team. They've surprised everyone. Defensively, they're so resolute and very tough to play against. They have a centre-forward in Chris Wood that's having the season of his life. But the area I'm looking at is midfield. It's very industrious. Players like Elliot Anderson and Ryan Yates in there. But I feel like you can combine that element of industry and sprinkle it with a bit of stardust. So I'm looking here at someone that's a bit of a ball player that can play maybe play further forward as well, although they'd have Morgan Gibbs-White, who's very good as well in that position. But I'm looking at a player from Liverpool, and I'm looking at Harvey Elliott. In this Forest team, he would be playing a bit deeper, and he'd be feeding the balls into Gibbs-White and being a creator of his own. He's a bit part player at Liverpool, and whilst Liverpool are enjoying success, I'm sure he wants to play a bigger role than that, and this presents an opportunity to be something more than just a bit part player. And from the team in third, we move on to Arsenal, and it's obvious where they're lacking at this moment in time. It's obvious what they need. They need a ruthless centre-forward. Gabriel Jesus, despite having a bit of a decent scoring run, he's now injured, but he's never really been that guy at Arsenal, has he, since making the move from Manchester City, and I feel like they need someone that's better than a fill-in, which Kai Havertz has been. It's the time to act, time to get that clinical centre-forward for them to win the league, and the guy that gets them over the line, that turns them from challengers into the team to beat, that guy is Alexander Isak from Newcastle. He's the most informed player in the division, and for me, he's the best all-round striker in the league. Haaland's numbers may be better, but I feel that Isak is the more complete player. There's not many teams in world football that he wouldn't get in, and he is absolutely the real deal. He would score 20, 25 league goals for Arsenal, and that would ultimately make the difference where they've been the last couple of seasons as runners-up. That would turn them into the title-winning team that they desperately want to be. But the team that do look like they are going to be champions this season are Liverpool. They are the runaway leaders, and they possess the most formidable attack in the league. A lot of talk at the minute about players out of contract and their status. One of those players being the fullback, Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's attracted a lot of headlines with a move to Real Madrid possibly being on the horizon. We'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But I'm actually looking at the other fullback, and that is Andy Robertson, who's been a fantastic servant to the club since he joined from Hull. And those two Liverpool fullbacks have almost changed the game, haven't they, in how influential they have been in Liverpool scoring goals, being their main creators and architects. However, I do feel Andy Robertson's standards have slightly dipped this season from what we've been used to seeing. In the game against Fulham, where he got sent off, Anthony Robinson completely outshone him, and Anthony Robinson's name has been brought up as a possible successor to Andy Robertson. But if you've been listening keenly, you'll know that I have used my Fulham player for this fantasy draft. So I have one player left, I have one club left, and that club is Bournemouth. We talked about the domino effect, didn't we? So I've got Kieran Tierney joining Ipswich as Leif Davis joins Bournemouth, which means Milos Kerkez is Liverpool bound. And unlike most of the transfers that are a bit out there, living in cloud cuckoo land, okay, it's not Haaland going to Southampton, it's not Salah going to Ipswich, but some of these are borderline ridiculous, I can't deny that. But this one here, Milos Kerkez to Liverpool, this one, it will happen. It won't happen this month, but it happens in the summer. You have my personal guarantee. And when it does happen, I would love some credit. And maybe, if it's not asking too much, a percentage of that transfer fee. So there we have it. That completes my fantasy transfer draft. Trades completed between all 20 Premier League clubs. I feel like I've gone all-American with talk about drafts and trades. So before I lose my mind, let me remind you of all the dealings. Southampton, they're going down, but Tommy Doyle will be joining them from Wolves. Leicester are bringing in Evan Ferguson from Brighton. Ipswich are bringing in Kieran Tierney from Arsenal. Maxence Lacroix, despite just joining Crystal Palace in the summer, you're on your way to the Midlands. You're going to Wolves. Johan Wissa, double figures this season for Brentford. You're going to Everton. Romeo Lavia is swapping West London for North London. He goes from Chelsea to Spurs. Unfortunately, Fulham fans, Rodrigo Muniz, he's out the door. He's making the trip from West London to East London. He goes to West Ham. Manchester United, after much talk about Jarrett Brantwaite in the summer, he gets his move. But a player departing Manchester United for Crystal Palace will be Marcus Rashford. Basement dwellers, Southampton, their young talent Tyler Diblin, he goes to Brentford. Fulham, this is a bit of a wild one, but £100 million man Jack Grealish, he's coming to Craven Cottage from Manchester City. Jed Spence, he's departing Spurs to go to Brighton. Jared Bowen swaps the claret and blue of West Ham for the claret and blue of Aston Villa. Leif Davis departs Ipswich to go to Bournemouth. Newcastle are getting Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa. Manchester City need a right back, and that right back is Ola Aina from Nottingham Forest. Chelsea, they need a goalkeeper, and that goalkeeper is Mads Hermansen from Leicester. Nottingham Forest, are they chasing the title? Well, they're going to get one of the title chasing players, and that's Harvey Elliott. Arsenal, they need a striker, and that striker is Alexander Isak. And finally, Liverpool, this one, as I said, as I reported, you heard it here first, Milos Kerkez will soon be a Liverpool player. Mark my words. That'll do it for this special Wildcard Wednesday. There's not been much transfer activity so far, has there? It's been a bit tame, a bit quiet on that front, but I'm sure it will hot up in the last week and a half of the window. A lot of these clubs will be making signings in the next week and a half. Some clubs more than others. Some clubs maybe not at all. But there you have it. A little bit of a fun for you, just a mock draft there, see what we could come up with in terms of incomings, outgoings among all the 20 Premier League clubs. Next up, the focus switches to Manchester United, so be sure to catch me next time as the build-up well and truly starts for that. Thanks for listening, catch you all next time.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.